Merry Christmas everyone! And talking about a possible New Year present, Biotech IBB could be something interesting to look at. I think there's a really good chance that IBB gave us a cycle low over here in early December. We see a bit of a positive divergence in RSI, where RSI has dipped twice into oversold, with a bit of a higher low on RSI, with lower lows on the price, and that is a positive divergence, which usually is bullish. We saw something similar at the end of the previous cycle. RSI came pretty close to oversold a couple of times with a higher low around that cycle low in May. Of course, there are some caution signs on the technicals here. We see the death cross formed in November, but as I mentioned in some of my older videos, a death cross does not always lead to a significant decline. Although perhaps there is a bit of a resistance from this 50-day moving average at the moment, maybe we might see something like an inverted head and shoulders on IBB, with the right shoulder forming perhaps over the next couple of weeks before IBB takes another stab at breaking above the 50-day moving average. So while we do have a position in Biotech with the members at myfinancesteacher.org, I try to keep stop losses not too close. I don't really want to be thrown out of a profitable trade, and believe me, it has happened a few times. The previous IBB cycle, which as I mentioned finished in early December, has been going on for 209 days. That's a pretty long cycle. Usually these cycles last for around half a year or so. That's actually pretty close to what happens to the general stock market. So we have 183 days of average cycle duration. That's since late 2016 at least. And what I want to show here is that there is quite a bit of a correlation in timing of cycle lows of biotech sector as well as the general stock market. We have S&P 500 at the bottom chart over here. And while there is a bit of a mismatch between the precise lows, the most recent cycle low on the general stock market took place over here in late September, early October. Yes, there was a significant dip in biotech, but we are observing a cycle low in early December instead. And something similar happened during the previous cycle as well. And mostly I think that's because of this healthcare concerns trade. When the fears of health concerns are reduced with the stock market continuing higher into the intermediate cycle, that's when perhaps biotech tends to come down a little more before continuing the stock markets higher into the cycle. But if we look at a lot of historical cycles, even over here in September 2020, the timing of the cycles was pretty close. And if we look at history beyond that, of course, this pandemic low is a huge drop in most assets you could look at, including cryptos. But beyond that, a lot of the cycles, as you see, do match, at least to some degree, in their timing. Most recently, though, IBB seems to be bottoming a little bit later than the general stock market, so we've likely seen a cycle low over here in early December. Next, let's have a look at seasonality. Going all the way back to 2014, December is usually just a sideways month for IBB. January is pretty good, especially in the first half, but usually by end of January the month turns out to be kind of an okayish month. If you only look back to 2016, again the situation is somewhat similar. December is sideways. January is kind of an okayish month, and again the same if you only go back to 2018. December kind of down to sideways. January is pretty good, especially in its first half. And whichever timing we look at, usually as you see, March is a pretty painful time for IBB, for biotech. So in another few months, perhaps the stock market will be ready to go down into the intermediate cycle low, together with a lot of its sectors, including biotech. But seasonality, in my opinion, is not as important to look at as market cycles, as well as sentiment levels on the markets. So next, let's have a look at that sentiment level. But before that, allow me a quick plug-in. Let me first welcome you at myfinancesteacher.org. which is a community of like-minded investors where I make regular updates on a range of markets, including precious metals, cryptocurrencies, stock market indices, energy, including uranium and fossil energy, as well as commodities such as copper, grains, and others. One of the interesting products in the community is the model portfolio, which is transparent, showing all of the history of my trades starting in July 2020, with the total gains without any leverage, so that's without taking too much risk, is around 55% between July 2020 and October 2021. With a 2x leverage, one perhaps could double the portfolio size in the same period. So if you want to see what's going on in the investment community, you are more than welcome to register. Now, looking at the market sentiment, as I mentioned many times in my previous videos, we want to buy when there's this proverbial blood is on the streets, and when everybody is getting excited about the product, that's when you want to reduce your positions. Looking at the optimism index on IBB, I think it's quite volatile and it's a little bit difficult to see where are the tops and bottoms. For example, if we look at late 2020, early 2021, while the cycle in IBB was still going higher, we see the optics kind of came back and down between really highly optimistic markets and pretty pessimistic markets sometimes as well. So instead, perhaps it's better to look at the 10-day moving average of this optimism index. This is the green line over here. It's pretty difficult to see this green line. Perhaps I can zoom in a little bit. And it seems to me that it's a bit of a leading indicator sometimes, perhaps especially on the tops. We see that the cycle doesn't actually give us a top before we see a bit of a divergence from this 10-day moving average of this optimism index. That happened in early 2020, in late 2020 to early 2021, and in the first half of 2021. Looking at the lows usually take place when this 10-day moving average of the optimism index comes close to somewhere around the level of 30 or so. In mid-2021, we saw a positive divergence from this moving average of the optimism index going into the actual cycle low, and looks like we are observing something similar right now. We saw a very deep drop back in October, but by December, while prices did come down, I think this vertical line indicates our most likely cycle low. We see that the 10-day moving average has dropped as well, but with a bit of a positive divergence again. So perhaps going into winter, especially with the seasonality charts as well, that's actually when people have more coughs and sneezes. Perhaps IBB will tend to do well over the next few months into that rallying stage of a new cycle. That is my opinion, but nobody knows the future, so I really want to know what you think about it. Share your views on biotech in the comments below. And as a new year present to me, hit that like button, share the video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Again, happy holidays. Bye-bye.